Home Education Book Club. And this week we read about, it was all about out of door life for children again. We have one more week of this after this week. And then we'll move on to the next section. But this is our second week in this part 2 section, out of door life for children. And so this week we talked about field lore and naturalists books, how a child uses his senses to learn and how he learns through things and not words. And then also how to put a child before things worth observing, and out-of-door geography, which I thought her method for out-of-door geography was really neat. So we'll go ahead and get started. I wasn't feeling too good earlier, but I was feeling up to this video now, so I thought I'd just go ahead and do it instead of waiting for another day. Hello. Welcome to the discussion. Alright, so first was field lore and naturalist books. And in this section, she talked about how at this young age, children don't have to learn all of the kind of graphic ins and outs of the living world. And she mentioned specifically dissection. And she said that at this age, they don't really need to dissect, because she's talking about children 6 and under, so they don't really need the graphic part of dissecting living things, even if it's like a flower, because they're sensitive still. And so she says a reverence for life at this age is more important than picking stuff apart and seeing inside a flower or whatever. A quote from this section was, "The child who sees his mother with reverent touch lift an early snowdrop to her lips learns a higher lesson than the print books can teach. Years hence, when the children are old enough to understand that science itself is in a sense sacred and demands some sacrifices, all the common information they have been gathering until then, and the habits of observation they have acquired, will form a capital groundwork for a scientific education. In the meantime, let them consider the lilies of the field and the fowls of the air." So pretty much, let's just observe these things. Let's not pick them apart at this age. Then she goes on to talk about classifying these different scientific things and how children will just kind of naturally sort things, which, I've seen my boys do that with their play cards and stuff. I think it's kind of like a natural inclination. Well, they'll just sort things. And you can use that, what they already do, to teach the habit of noticing, like sort them by their leaf shape, or what kind of veins does this leaf have, or let's see, what else did she say? Divisions in the leaf, or if you guys have other suggestions for how to do these simple classifications for younger children, you're welcome to add some ideas. But those were her thoughts. She says the power to classify, discriminate, and distinguish between things that differ is amongst the highest faculties of the human intellect, and no opportunity to cultivate it should be let slip. And that's kind of the basis of science, isn't it? We're constantly sorting things, and the family, genus, whatever it's called. Somebody's gonna have to remind me. But we classify all the scientific things into different, like things. Okay, so she says because that's just their natural inclination, cultivate it and help them to grow that. And I know a way that we kind of classify is on our nature shelves. We'll group like things in a jar, or display the leaves together or whatever. So nature shelves are a good way to do that. And then my boys are really proud of the things on their nature shelf as well. Then she goes on to talk about naturalist books, which I don't know if you guys saw at the bottom of this page in the book. She had a list of books down there by naturalists of her time, and I Googled all these books, and man, they were neat books, and several of them were not like the field guides we looked at last week, but they were like storybooks, and I thought that was really neat. So if you have a chance, on my summary for this week, I linked to those books, but you can also Google them because they're all in the public domain, so they're free. You can go look through those books online, and they're really neat, and I would like to get my hands on those. But she mentioned The Water Babies by Charles Kingsley, Madam How and Lady Why by Charles Kingsley, Any Book by Eliza Brightwin, Eyes and No Eyes series by Arabella Buckley, Life and Her Children by Arabella Buckley, Any Books by Ernest Thompson Seton, which I believe that guy, it said he helped found the Boy Scouts. I think that's which person that was. The School of the Woods by William Joseph Long, and The Little Brother of the Bear by William Joseph Long. And then Wild Nature's Way by Richard Kierton, and Living Animals of the World by Richard Kierton, which Richard Kierton and his brother Cherry, I found out, teamed up to do a lot of the books that they wrote, and one was a photographer and one was the writer, and so they kind of did these books together, and were also some of the very first men to make nature documentaries. So I thought that was really cool. So that's Cherry Kierton, the brother of this Richard Kierton that she recommends on that page about naturalist books. I also asked you guys about naturalist books this week, and a couple that were given were Raising a Wild Child, and then any of John Muir's books. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. If not, you can correct me. And I actually have one of his books, so I'll show you. It's kind of a, hey guys, seeing some familiar faces. I'm starting to recognize your names, although not everybody has their first name in there, so I'm not sure what your real name is. I see Kaylee. I recognize that one. Erica, Courtney, and then people that I don't know if these are your real names or not. Andrea or Andrea. I had a friend named Andrea, and everybody called her Andrea all the time, so you can correct me on that one. Hello! Okay, so John Muir's big old The Law's Guide to Nature Drawing and Journaling. So this one is like a how-to nature journal book. It's a really neat book. I mean, he has examples of all kinds of things in here. Birds, flowers. It's like a step-by-step instruction guide of how to draw things in nature. And he gives all kinds of tips about how to observe these things, how to do the sketch, how to color it in, what kind of tools to use. This is a really good book if you want to really get into the ins and outs of nature journaling. Check out this frog. Just a really good book. Yes, it is pretty. He has beautiful illustrations. Here's some more on the back. It shows several of them. Hi, Molly Lou. Okay, so this one is The Law's Guide to Nature Drawing and Journaling by John Muir. Law. John Muir Laws. Okay. I'd never heard of that book. Putting it in my Amazon cart next. Yes, and I have tons of books to show you guys today too, so get out some pen and paper. Okay, so next, Keeping a Nature Journal and The Curious Nature Guide by Claire Walker Leslie are great too. Oh, good, I haven't heard of that one. The Curious Nature Guide. Let me write that one down real quick before I forget. The Curious Nature Guide. And did you say another one? No, okay. Okay, good. There are 2 books. Oh, Keeping a Nature Journal is an actual book. I thought you meant like actually keeping a nature journal. I got it now. Okay, I'm going to look into those because those sound good. Alright, so next, this is the Nature Journal book that I got it from Wild and Free. They do it limited time though, so I'm not sure if it's available right now. I got it the last time that they had it available. I think they might do it once or twice a year, but it's by Kristen Rogers, and it's kind of the same concept where she shows you how to nature journal, and it's a really neat book as well. And she just does the step-by-step how to sketch it, what tools to use, and how to paint it. So this one's a good one too. Let's see if I can find other pictures to show. She also has like craft ideas. Like I think this is their Advent calendar for the Christmas season. So there's other stuff in there too besides just nature journaling. But this is a really fun book. But it may not be available right at this minute, because I think it's a limited time thing. How to draw a water bug. So that's an option as well. Hi, everybody. We're talking about naturalist books. Okay, so moving on from those, some more, these are kind of more modern compared to the ones that Charlotte Mason suggested, of course, but these are really popular. The Nature Anatomy, the Julia Rothman books, and I think lots of people have these, so you've probably seen these, but it's a set of 3, and I could not find my food anatomy book anywhere, but there's Nature Anatomy, Food Anatomy, and Farm Anatomy, and these are fun books, and she's got all kinds of stuff inside, and the illustrations are really fun, so those are good ones too, and good for little people. And these pictures, like, I know we use this along with our Playful Pioneers for nature journaling, and these seem to be easier for the kids to copy whenever they do their own nature journals, because these illustrations are a little more simple than like these by John Muir Laws. Okay, and then I thought I'd throw this one in there too, because it's a drawing from nature by Jim Arnowski. And these are black and white, like pencil illustrations, but they're really pretty too. And it's the same idea. He shows you how to draw it from scratch. See if I can find a good one. Like, here's a mountain. He's showing how to draw different types of landforms, which we're talking about geography today too, so this one's a good one. That's a good one. Okay, so now that I think that was all of my naturalist type books, and I shared a few last week too. It definitely gets their interest sparked. My 4-year-old loves it as much as I do. The Julia Rothman, I think, is what you're talking about. Yeah, my boys love those books. Those are nice. I haven't seen is Farm Anatomy, which that one's a good one. See, I didn't show you inside of it. We haven't used it a whole lot, but this is the one that shows like the parts of the animals on the farms. So that's a fun one too. Okay. So after naturalist books, she talks about how mothers and teachers should also know about nature as well, so we can answer all of the curious questions that our children have about nature. And she says that the children will adore her for knowing what they want to know, and who knows, but she may give its bent for life to some young mind destined to do great things in the world. And then I asked you guys how you learn about nature yourself this week, and you guys said go out in it, look at it, look it up, and then observe it, which is a good kind of mantra to keep, to check off. Go in it, look at it, look it up, observe it. And somebody said Google, which, yes, Google is very helpful, as well as YouTube. Also lots of nature books, which we talked about nature books last week. And then nature documentaries too are really helpful in learning about nature for yourself as the mom and the teacher. Okay, so if you guys have any other suggestions, you are welcome to insert your suggestions here for ways you educate yourself in nature. Alright, so the child gets knowledge by means of his senses. Charlotte reminds us that a child's curiosity it's already there. We don't have to create it. We just kind of have to cultivate it and not snuff it out. And she says they're constantly absorbing new information through their senses or taking in intellectual food, is what she says. There's so much for them to see and learn, but she also said nature is like the most gentle teacher because nature always gives gradually, persistently, and nature never is overbearing on the child's, what the child can take in. So it's a great first teacher in those early years. By storing up this knowledge that's so abundant in the natural world around him, a child will one day be capable of conceiving things which he hasn't seen. Which I hadn't really thought of that before, but it's true. There's kind of these abstract ideas out there that it's harder for a child to grasp. But if they're constantly exposed to things in the natural world and familiar with these things, it's easier for them down the line to understand new ideas and new facts that they didn't understand before. So that is a neat concept that I hadn't considered before that I thought was very interesting. So the more he's exposed to now, the more he'll be capable of understanding new things later. So we got to get him out into the natural world. Then she makes a note on overpressure, and she says, it is possible to overpressure your children with too much, or with, she says it's not that it's too much, that you're giving them too much, it's that you're giving them the wrong thing. So if they're overpressured, it's because it's something that they're not yet ready to learn. And my immediate thought with this was like handwriting for a little boy. All three of my boys now that are, handwriting age really struggle with it in the beginning. So we have to take it really slow for handwriting. And I mean like 10 minutes of handwriting in the beginning. Just practice this letter. Like my my 6-year-old is learning just still letter shapes right now. So we just take it super duper slow. With my oldest, I made the mistake of like, why can't you do this? I showed you this already. And it would just bring him to tears because I was expecting too much of him. It was the wrong, work to give him at that age. I think that's common for little boys. For my little boys anyway. Maybe not everybody's little boys. Maybe some little boys just are good at handwriting, but not mine. Anyways, so I've learned through, mistakes. My first son really, really struggled with it, and I put too much pressure on him. So with my second son, I took it much easier, and he actually now has better handwriting than my oldest. So it's not that we're giving them too much, it's that we give them the wrong thing. Okay, but back to nature. She says, give the child work that nature intended for him, and the quantity he can get through with ease is practically unlimited. So if you give them the right thing, the things that they can do the sky's the limit. Okay, so she goes on to talk about object lessons. And I thought this section was really interesting because she touches on the object lessons that are so often used in like kindergarten, at the kindergarten age. And she compares it to a French man who fed his horse a bean a day, which obviously isn't enough for a horse. In my understanding of this, and you are welcome to type in how you felt about this, was that it's the difference between, a full and broad look at something, with stories and books and videos and, a really full-bodied look at something versus, color the worksheet type lesson. So that was my understanding of what a bean a day lesson was. If you had a different understanding, you are welcome to, put in your thoughts about that, but that was kind of what I thought. So she says these Bean a Day lessons, they're not enough, and they leave our children intellectually hungry, so they're like bored. So we have to provide them with a full-bodied educational experience. And for me, I'm thinking programs like the Playful Pioneers, 5 in a Row. If you haven't heard of that, that's all picture book based. And then also the Beautiful Feet books are really good, and they're all really literature based studies. Are what I feel like are the Charlotte Mason type method of learning. Okay, then she talks about how a child learns from things, which I thought this section was interesting too, because she said, as grown-ups, we're used to learning through words, and that's the medium through which we get our knowledge. But for a child, they only associate meanings to a limited number of words because they're still growing their vocabulary. So learning just through words is harder for a child to do than an adult. So she says this isn't how you teach. You can't teach a child just through words. You have to put him face to face with these things that you're trying to teach them through the words. And she says if you put him face to face with a thing, he is 20 times as quick as you are in knowing all about it. Knowledge of things flies to the mind of a child as steel filings to a magnet. With his knowledge of things, his vocabulary grows. So it's like a twofold thing. We want him to learn the words, but he's not going to learn the words just through our words. He needs to see the thing and explore the thing, and on the way, his vocabulary grows, which is what we wanted in the first place, right? So she says it's a law of the mind that what we know, we struggle to express. Which, you guys have seen me just on these videos where I'm like, blah, blah, blah. What am I trying to say? I don't know what I'm trying to say. Even as a grown person, it's hard to always express. That's why I much prefer writing to speaking. But if it's hard for me to express what I'm thinking and feeling, how much harder is it for my child who doesn't have as big of a grasp on these words than I do? Yes, this was an excellent concept. Things versus words and learning. Yes, and something I hadn't considered before. But it's so true, but I didn't know how to express that. I'm gonna have to watch the rest later. Oh, somebody had to leave. That's alright. They're always asking questions. Yes, which she also talked about later. Right here, this is the next part of my notes. This explains the never-ending questions of a young child. They're not on a search for knowledge, they're in search of words to express their knowledge. So we have to do the best to find the balance between a child shut up in 4 walls, learning only through text, and a child running loose in the country with no method or direction for all of his observations. Which I thought was very interesting. It's a balance. Okay, so let me make sure I didn't skip any questions. No, okay. Alright, hello everyone. Okay, so then she goes on to talk about the sense of beauty comes from early contact with nature, which I agree. And things like having a pet helps a child be compassionate, I feel like, or, tend into a garden like we talked about last week, the cultivating of these things. And it's more than just what you're doing now, there are inward things going on as well. Then she talks about how most men lose the habit of observation, which I think is true, men and women, not just men. But she talks about different people of the past who didn't lose their habit of observation, and how now they have blessed all these generations, hundreds of years later, like Marianne Evans, who was really George Eliot. She wrote Middlemarch, which I've read part of that, but not all of it, but it's a good book. Poets like Alfred Lord Tennyson and William Wordsworth, and then Charles Dickens's fictional character, David Copperfield. All these people didn't lose their habit of observation, but continued to use it and, bless the rest of us with it, with their words. Okay, then she talks about this popular phrase that an observant child should be put in the way of things worth observing. There's little use, she says, of being an observant person if you're not put in the midst of things worth observing. So we greatly limit a child's horizons when they're only ever exposed to their neighborhood streets. So we got to get them out there, which is what we've said over and over the past few weeks. Let me see. Okay, and then she talks about how our goal at this age in our child's development, we don't have to teach every single thing. It's exposure and, getting them out in it. And all the things that they learn at this young age echo of the greater things in the wider world that they will one day learn to understand and be able to grasp the concept of. She says it's not necessary that the child should be told anything about disintegration or dicotyledon, only that he should observe the wood and pith in the hazel twig, the pleasant roundness of the pebble. By and by he will learn the bearing of the facts with which he is already familiar. A very different thing from learning the reason why of facts which have never come under his notice. Which is so true. Why would you want to learn a bunch of facts about something you don't know anything about? And versus her method of, let's just expose them to all these wonderful things and the facts will come later when they're older and can understand these things. Which takes so much weight off of our shoulders as the educator. We don't have to teach them all the things right now. It's a process, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I need to let my child observe more rather than try and spout facts. This was so timely for me. Me too. Yes, me too. Because I struggle with that pressure of we have to learn all these things right now. No, we don't. You slowly build on what you learned before, and it slowly comes together in this beautiful unfolding of their own independent education, which I think is neat, because whenever you do it in this way, they do become independent thinkers and not fact regurgitators, what we sometimes feel like they need to be. They don't need to be fact regurgitators. They need to be independent thinkers and learners. And I feel like with this method that she's, suggesting to us, that's where we get from here. Okay, thank you 3 people who are watching. Alright, so power will pass more and more into the hands of scientific men. I thought this was a very interesting quote, and she was quoting Kingsley, which I believe is the same Kingsley of the naturalist books that she recommended. But he says, I say it deliberately as a student of society and of history. Power will pass more and more into the hands of scientific men. They will rule and they will act. Cautiously, we may hope, and modestly and charitably, because in learning true knowledge, they will have learnt also their own ignorance, and the vastness, the complexity, the mystery of nature. But they will be able to rule, they will be able to act, because they have taken the trouble to learn the facts and the laws of nature. Wow, that is such a powerful statement, but it's true. And here we are 100+ years since this man said this, and I think we're witnesses to that this was true, what he thought came to be. The scientists, and all of us are scientists now because our knowledge base is just massive now. We know so much more than generations of the past in terms of, how these natural processes work, I feel like. And man, I just thought that was just a powerful statement. And the fact that he said, they will rule and they will act. Cautiously, we may hope, and modestly and charitably. And as they expand their knowledge, which I find this to be true, as you expand your knowledge, you also realize how ignorant you are. It's kind of, 2 heads of the same coin. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. but it's a neat process. But man, I just thought that was a great quote, so I put that in my summary. Okay, so in addition to this interaction with nature, you're also growing your child's personal well-being. So there are other advantages of this being out in nature and learning about nature, and they're a lot more internal than external. She says, a love of nature implanted so early that it will seem to them hereafter to have been born in them. It will enrich their lives with pure interests, absorbing pursuits, health, and good humor, which I think is just great and so true. All right, so moving on from there, she talks about geography. I can't remember when I was going to talk about these books that I have over here. I guess for geography. I don't know. Maybe there were more from my naturalists books. Okay, well, I'll just show you right now because these are good books as well. Yes, they were for the naturalist books. So if you're just joining, you're getting the second half of our naturalist books. So this one, the Burgess Animal Book for Children, I feel like it's similar to the ones that she recommended in home education. And there's also like the Bird Book for Children. I'm not sure which all books. We have not read this one, but I would like to because I flipped through it and it's like a storybook, but I mean, full of knowledge. So this one is a great one too. And then these Christian Liberty Nature Readers are good ones as well. It's a series and there are 5 of them, and they go up in levels for each book. Like this is the first book, and it's really big large text. And then as you go up to level 2 and level 3 and level 4, they get a little more complicated or more for older students. But these earlier ones are for the younger guys. So this is 1, and we have all the way to 5. And these are really conversational and really, it's like a conversation between the author and the child reader. So these are good ones. They are written from a Christian perspective, so maybe not for everybody, but they're good. I don't know that I would say storybook, but on the same lines as storybooks. More of like a very conversational way of teaching these scientific things to a child. Okay, and then also, everybody's heard of the Usborne books, and we have a lot of these. These are the little ones that are, how flowers grow. These are good for like seeing the processes of the way things work. Like it has the different flowers, and it shows like how a seed turns into a flower, how bees pollinate the flowers. Like here it starts with the seed and little beans sprout. So of course these Usborne books are good. I think everybody's heard of those. Caterpillars and butterflies, tadpoles and frogs. These are all life cycle type books, but I thought I'd share these too. Not necessarily naturalist books, but along those lines. Okay. And then also good ones for little learners who are learning scientific things are the Let's Read and Find Out series, which they have several different authors, but it talks about, this one's about human digestion, and then this one's about fossils. They're all the topics in this series of books. How deep is the ocean? What makes the earthquakes? So we have several of these. There's tons of them, and they're good for early learners. And they have, pictures and good explanations for children. And Charlotte Mason said we don't have to have complicated answers at this age. They can be simple answers, and I think these are a great means of doing that. Let's Read and Find Out is the series, and I got all of those on Amazon. Oh, this is another one, Your Skin and Mine. So they cover all kinds of topics. And then also, Gail Gibbons is great for this younger age. The same concept as those, and she has tons of topics too. This one's about spiders. Oh, a trapdoor spider. But of course, I would never make that face in front of my kids because we don't want to snuff out their interest, right? Frogs. Let's see if I can find a good one. She does lots of anatomy labeling as well in her books, which is nice. So these are great. Those are Gail Gibbons. Let's see. And then I have her butterfly book too. We have tons of Gail Gibbons books, so these are just a few of them. There's another example of her anatomy of butterfly. They're very thorough, but very, easy for the child to understand, not too complicated. These books are helpful. Good, I'm glad they're helpful. I hoped that they would be. And then these others, here's another one by Gail Gibbons, From Seed to Plant, another Gail Gibbons book. This was the one I was thinking of when I was thinking the process of the seed to the plant. But yes, Gail Gibbons. And then these over here are for geography. So let's move on to geography. Okay, so this was very interesting to me, and I love that she laid out step by step, this is how you can teach geography in your local area. You don't have to feel like, well, we can never learn about these things because we don't live by a giant lake. Well, yes, you can, because there are opportunities all around you to teach world geography, not just your local geography. Okay, so she says, pictorial geography, it's everywhere. A duck pond is a lake or an inland sea. Any brooklet will serve to illustrate the great rivers of the world. A hillock grows into a mountain, an alpine system. A hazel copse suggests the mighty forests of the Amazon. A reedy swamp, the rice fields of China. A meadow, the boundless prairies of the West. The pretty purple flowers of the common mallow is a text whereupon to hang the cotton fields of the southern states. Indeed, the whole field of pictorial geography may be covered in this way. So just finding geographical characteristics in your local area and finding those connections for your kids. And like I asked you guys give some examples of small things in your local area that you could teach the great things of the world's geography, like bodies of water, stuff like that. So you guys said mountains or giant boulders, rocks. And we used to live in Colorado Springs. We lived there for about 8 years. And if you've ever been there, it sits right at the foot of Pikes Peak, which is a beautiful mountain. But there's also the Garden of the Gods, and it's like these huge, like naturally formed rocks, and it's like they're amazing. And it's like water has eroded them and weather, and they like make these beautiful shapes, and you like walk through this beautiful red rock garden, and I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, you could compare it to something like the Grand Canyon, even though you're in Colorado. So there you can help your kids make those connections. If you don't live by the Garden of the Gods, there are smaller things too. You guys also said creeks or fields, canyons, even dry lake beds, forests. We live on like the edge of a big forest here in Texas, but the trees here they're amazing. It's like a wonderland, fairy wonderland, whenever you go through the really wooded areas. And so there are ways of teaching your children about the greater world geography in your local area. Okay, so let's see, what else did she say? Okay, so then she goes on to talk about how to teach your child directions and north, south, east, and west, and using a compass and stuff. And she started with the sun. So that could be one of the first things you teach your child in this step-by-step guide she kind of gives at the end of this section we read this week about to observe the sun and first its relation to time. And that can lead to more conversations about the sun and the earth and the moon and the way they're in this constant orbit. And then also talking about weather and kind of laying down this very basic, it doesn't have to be complicated explanations, but this basic understanding of weather and how that varies depending on your geographical location. And then she talks about, you can introduce distance, and she gives an example of this by first you measure a child's stride or his sibling's strides, and from there you can calculate like how many steps does it take to get from here to here. And then you just slowly build on top of that. Well, how many steps did it take your brother? And then you can introduce time. Okay, well, it took this many steps. How long does it take us? So how long would it take us to go this far? And just slowly building on these really basic, type things that she recommended. And then you continue to build. From there, the sun is such a great starting point. I'll be learning this alongside them for sure. I know whenever I read this the other day, I sat down with my boys. I was like, okay, does anybody know which way the sun rises? Does anybody know which way it sets? I felt like, okay, we laid down the very first foundation of understanding direction. So I felt the same way too. I want to learn, because I don't know. I look at my Google map and it tells me. But I would like to be able to just look at the sun and be like, oh yeah, we're going east, like my great grandma used to do. She just knew, because it was more valuable at the time, I guess. And now, we have our smartphones to tell us, but I'd like my boys to know as well. We were watching a show the other day and these people were in a maze, and I kept thinking if they knew which direction the sun was in the sky, they would be able to navigate through this maze so much easier. And it's true, you could say, okay, wait. Anyways, that got me to thinking, so that's funny. Okay, so we did distances. Okay, now direction. So she gives, once distance and time have been established, that you go back to the sun and you can introduce direction, north, south, east, and west. And she gives a really practical way of teaching it. The sun rises in the east, sets in the west, and she tells them to put out their arms, one facing the east and the west, and then, in your front yard, so it's something they're familiar with. And from there they can get familiar with the surroundings that they're already familiar with, and learn north, south, east, and west, and that, where you live, and then build upon that like everything else that she says. And regarding the sun, she also says, take note of the sun's position at different times during the day. So you could just look up in the sky and be like, oh, it's about 12 o'clock. Or observe the lengths of the shadows throughout the day. Consider the harshness or softness of the light. And then also comparing the hotter hours versus the cooler hours of the day. So all of these things that they're familiar with, because they know they're there with, let's discuss them and talk about what this means in relation to learning geography. Okay, and then, I skipped ahead with the north, south, east, and west, but okay. Then practice in finding direction. So once he knows north, south, east, and west, she says it's likely that he'll be kind of more interested. Okay, well, which way does this window face? Which way is that? What side of the street is that on? Which direction is the chimney smoke blowing? Which direction are the leaves blowing? And then she also said, which this was helpful to me as well, that the wind is named after the direction from which it comes, not the direction it blows toward. Just as he is English because he was born in England, and he's not French because he goes to France. That was very helpful for me. So I thought that was a good example, and I'll never forget now why the wind is named what it is. It's the direction from which it's coming. Okay, so slowly he'll begin to understand that many things are not exactly one direction or another, but more east than west, and so on. And later, you can give him a compass. Once he has these kind of basic ideas about direction, he can have a compass. And then watch how the needle moves independently of, or opposite of what he's moving, because it's always trying to point north. And then build some compass drills on top of their already learned knowledge about direction. And I just thought this was a great lesson. It's so easy to do, like it's not complicated to teach, and I just thought it was great. And from there, she talks about learning boundaries. Okay, so now we can learn, what are the boundaries of the plot of land that we live on? Or, like she says, such and such a turnip field, for instance, is bounded by the high road on the south, by a wheat crop on the southeast, and a hedge on the northeast, and so on. And from there, they can draw their own little rough maps that are going to prepare them to be able to read maps one day. And I just thought this was so neat. Oh, the wind. You didn't know either. I'm glad I'm not the only one. I didn't know that. But now I'll never forget. So yeah, I just thought this was ingenious and so simple, such a simple way to build these geographical skills in our kids, to the point that they're drawing their own maps and can say, well, this is north, south, east, and west. And wouldn't it be fun to like draw a treasure map? And like there's endless possibilities of the fun things you could do with maps and geography. Okay, so all of these practices joined together will teach him within his own neighborhood how to roughly map out his local geography. It's probable that a child's own neighborhood will give him opportunities to learn the meaning of hill and dale, pool and brook, watershed, the current, bed, banks, tributaries of a brook, the relative positions of villages and towns. And then now they can, they know how to read a world map. All because you did these simple practices at home. So I just thought it was really witty and neat. Such a neat idea. Okay, so I asked you guys this week about some geography resources, and here were the suggestions. Trail Guide to the World, or Trail Guide to the US, Google Earth, which I use Google Maps all the time, but Google Earth too, that's a great resource. And it's so interactive, which is really neat. Give Your Child the World. I had not heard of that one, so I'm going to look into that one. Letters from Afar, that seems like a really neat resource. We have not subscribed to that, but I would like to. Marco Polo Geography Study, and then the Beautiful Feet Maps from Beautiful Feet Books, and then also the Holling books, which I have this series, and these are really great storybooks for learning geography. Men of the Mississippi is about a turtle. Seabird is about a seabird. Paddle to the Sea, and these are all by Holling C. Holling. Tree in the Trail, and then Pagoo, it's about a little hermit crab. So this one would be like geography about I'm having a moment. What is it called? The tide pool, or all the creatures that live in a tide pool. Tree in the Trail. We have not read all these. We've read a couple of them, but they're really great. Tree in the Trail is about this tree, and it's like the life of this tree and how it grows from a little sapling, and it gets like beat up by these trampling buffaloes or something, and then a little boy comes along and like props it up with rocks, and anyways, it's just a neat story and teaches all of this geography along the way. So these are really a good resource that make it like story time, but also you're learning geography. Okay, so those are all my geography recommendations. And that was my last question in my questions. So I guess I'm done. This section was really good. I enjoyed it. It was good, 20 or so pages that we read. The next section we're reading like I think 17 pages, but it will finish off this section about out of door life for children and then move on to the next section. But do you have these books or resources linked or in list form? There's so many great ones you are sharing. I will put them in my blog post for this with week's readings. I meant to do that last week and I need to do it for last week too, so that the books I recommended are linked in there so that you can find them, because they're really good books. And you guys shared good ones too, so I'll link to those too, and I might need to put some in my Amazon basket too. Oh, well, you're welcome. I'm glad that there was like one person at one point. It must have been you, Courtney. I think you were the only one that was here the whole time. But thank you, because if it had gone to 0, I would have been like, I guess I just would have kept talking and pretended like it didn't happen. But thank you for watching, and thank y'all for being here. I know it's hard. I don't know when it's most convenient for everybody. I asked today, and I asked if it was better on a weekend or a weekday, and it was literally like 50-50. So I don't know. Oh, it's okay. You don't have to apologize. It's okay. I understand everybody's busy, and it's hard to know when everybody's available. I don't know. So I just my boys were behaving today, and I started feeling a little better. So I thought, well, I'll just go ahead and do it, because tomorrow we have basketball and football. So it probably wouldn't have happened tomorrow. So I'm glad that you guys are enjoying this. I'm trying to do my best, and I hope that these are helpful. Anyways, I guess I'll let you guys go. I forgot to post my Instagram post for the discussion for this week's reading, so I'm going to post that after I get off of here. And you are welcome to jump on there and add any comments. And I'm also going to add my past videos onto my IGTV channel, which I don't know why I didn't think of that before, but I'm going to do that as well so that they're easily accessible right here in Instagram and everybody can go back and look at them. Alright, so you guys have a great week, and I will see you next Sunday after we finish this section. We'll talk to you later. Bye, guys.